Welcome back to the Dragon's Lair, and I am Nexus. And here we are here to discuss the legend. That is the 1911. This gun has had over 100 years worth of service. Multiple World War conflicts. Still the standard by a lot of people as to what a gun needs to be. Still used in competitions to this day. It is a legend in its own right. This one particularly is the A1, 1911 A1. So this one I think would be the World War II model versus the World War I model. It of course prominently has the grip safety. You have your slide safety right there. No decocker. So if you're going to decock it, you gotta do it the hard way. By today's standards, it's not a very safe gun. They do have the 2011 version of this gun now, which is a double stack magazine in it. This is a single stack. It only holds 7 or 8 rounds. There may be a 9 round too, but I know mine are all 7 or 8. This one specifically is the Tisas, and I actually just recently found that out. When I bought this, it was on cheaper than dirt. It was a $400 1911. I had not had good experiences with the 1911. I had a Springfield Armory one before this, and it shot like crap. I honestly, for over a decade, thought 1911s were overhyped for a long time. They shot like crap. And my only experience was, of course, with my Springfield. I traded it off for a car, ironically. And I saw this one sitting on, many years later, I saw this one sitting on cheaper than dirt. And I was thinking that when I got my Springfield, it was used. And I thought maybe I should try a new one to see if it was just the fact that mine was abused. Because I'd read these can be easily abused, especially if people run rounds through them. Safe. But, so I bought this one. The big notes of this one was, like I said, I didn't know it was a Tisas when I first got it. I thought it was a Zig M. I'd never heard of it. What? I looked it up, found out it was a Turkish company. They're most prominently known for using cold forged barrels. And when I got it, it had standard plastic grips on it, and it shot a lot better. And I will say it redeemed 1911s in my eyes, because it shot so much better than the old Springfield Armory one that I had. And I was pleasantly surprised that I actually enjoyed shooting this. Now, I'm still not a big 45 shooter. Like I said, I've been a 9mm shooter for a long time. But you don't really notice with this one that's 45. Sure, there's a little more concussion wave when you fire, a little more boom. But the first thing I did, we'd had the Hogue rubber grips on my 226, so I decided to put them on here, and that is the most comfortable freaking handle I have ever felt. There's a lot of them I like my Taurus, the Beretta, my Sig. This, though, these grips made this freaking gun. These will never come off because they are just fantastic on there. They feel so good. They're standard Hogue wraparound grips. The gun hasn't been modified other than that. It's still the generic A1 configuration. I did lose the lug. If you ever taken a 1911 off, people tend to lose those. So I bought a new one and a spare because I lost it at one point. These are not the most complicated gun I'd ever taken apart. that reserved for, I think it was the Smith & Wesson 5906. It was the one the FBI used for a long time, or for a short time, however long it was. That's the reason I got it. It came apart in a bajillion pieces. This one is a little more complicated than when you get to your standard guns today, like the Beretta, the Taurus, the Glock, most Glock clones. They all come apart very easy. I mean, you just usually a button and a switch, or even just you pull down, like on the Canic, you just chook, and it pops up. This one has a procedure that you have to go through to take it apart. And it involves this, locking it open, getting it in the right spot to match this little indentation to your slide lock, and then opening it up, and then making sure you don't shoot the lug out all the way across the room or into the forest, as we've done a couple of times. So you got to twist the barrel lock left and right. It's an interesting little procedure to take it down. And getting it back together is not always straightforward. But that being said, honestly, it doesn't need to be taken apart a whole lot. This is an ultra reliable gun. Keep it a little bit oiled and it just functions like no other. I mean, it goes and goes and goes. This one is I want to say 2014 or 2015 model. So this is before Tisas actually got pretty well known. This was, I think, one of their first 1911s they made. And you can still buy the Colt 1911 to this day. It's quite prominent out there, but you're going to pay a good chunk of change for a modern Colt, or even something like a Kimber, or one of the others, or the 2011 competition guns can be multiple thousands of dollars. So this one, like I said, was $430 when I bought it. I think they're about $460 now, from what I've seen. And they've gone to a lot of differences from this earlier model. This one, I said, had the cold forged barrel, but the rest of this has been enhanced in the newer models, which gave them an even better reputation. Now, that being said, I, again, have never had any problems with this gun. This is shot perfectly. Though I will say 45's expensive. I don't keep it in stock a lot. And I've only shot probably 300 or 400 rounds through this, just because it costs so much to shoot. And usually when we go out, we have plenty of 9mm and stuff like that, so it tends to be the one we shoot. Now, I am looking for, I want to get the same style of gun, a Zig 1911A1 Tisas in 10mm, because I found out they make them, or they did make them anyways. I'd like to find one, because honestly, I like 10mm now. I'm becoming a huge fan of it. And I won't get rid of the 45, but I'd like a 10mm to go with it. It'd be kind of cool if I could get one with the stainless steel down here, the satin steel down here, and the black up here, just to be kind of different, compare the two. But anyways, these guns have defined generations of people in the shooting industry. Even in this format, the A1 format, people still talk about the trigger on this, how smooth and crisp it is. That's something they still do to this day. And it's crazy. A little trick I learned out on the internet, by the way. If it's cocked and you're trying to figure out how to decock it, if you pull it down, you'll push the safety in, and then you slowly let the thing up. Do make sure it's empty when you do that. Anytime you let the hammer up, which you've seen me do on multiple guns, there's a chance you'll fire it. There's always a chance. You have to be very careful doing that. That's a very stupid move. And the only reason I do it anymore is because I know the gun's empty and I verified it's empty. I will never do it if the gun is loaded. I will unload it, then release the hammer. Decockers are really the way to go in the modern life. If you're using a hammered gun instead of a striker fire. Striker fires are a whole new ball game. As I said, I just recently got into those. Anyways, the performance of this thing is actually pretty good. Um, Recoil is heavier than 9mm, but not by a whole lot. I have pretty good with the handle and everything else. This stays on target pretty good. I've never had that much of a problem with it. It's the capacity is low, but you are firing 45, which there's lots of debates in the modern world about 45. Some say, well, it's the God cartridge, it's the America's cartridge, it's the only cartridge you should ever fire. I mean, it's a fun cartridge to fire. It's a very expensive cartridge to fire. And performance-wise, it's weird that maybe it's just because they haven't really applied them, but the 9mm is shot up ballistically so much farther than it was in like the 80s and the 90s. But the 45 is pretty much remaining the same. So it's, when you got 7, 8 rounds versus guns now that are holding 20 rounds or 18 rounds of 9mm, it's hard not to go for that. It really is. It's just the ballistics, this is better ballistics than my 40, which has tiny better ballistics than any of the 9mm. It's a very narrow margin on the 9 versus 40. So, yeah, you do get better ballistics, but it's very slow. But then again, I tend to ascribe the fact that, most people are like, yeah, it's a slow round, though. It starts dropping faster. Pistols aren't really made to shoot 100 yards. You can, and there are people who are very, very good at shooting it at that range. But that's not what they're really designed for. They're designed for 30 feet. They're designed for close range combat. So in that respects, the 45 is still a very viable round. And it hits like a Mack truck. It is ridiculously. And there is just something to be said about looking down that barrel. It is just freaking huge compared to any of the 9mm, even the 10mm, honestly. My 10mm may be that big, but I don't think it is. This one has the very, very simple GI sights. This is serrated up here, so technically you have some elevation, but honestly you can't really tell that much. Surprisingly, I'm pretty accurate with these at, 30 feet. I was, as simple as they are, and I'm used to the 3-dot sights, these were not bad. I actually was fairly accurate and very comfortable with them. This one is single action only. You can pull the trigger all day long, even if you have the safety in. It's not going to fire. Anybody knows 1911s, they're single action, means this has to be cocked to fire it. Okay. So usually you'd put a round in, and rack the slide, and then you'd be ready. Of course, if you have it cocked when you're carrying it, you can then end around in the chamber. You can put your safety on. It won't fire. You got the double hand when it's in your holster. If that's not pressed, it won't fire. If the safety's up, it won't fire. So when you draw, there's very little chance of you firing it no matter what you do. Now the big risk there is, as you draw, you flip the thing off, and that would be bad. And that's, again, training. Any handgun, it's about training. And this is something in modern people that I think they lose a little bit. Some people talk about it, but I think it gets lost a little bit. If you're going to have a handgun, you got to learn. You got to shoot it. You got to be familiar with it, how it works, how it runs, the safety quirks on it. Because each gun, each model, not to mention each gun, is different. And you have to learn their intricacies. You have to be comfortable with them. You also should never take for granted that a gun's unloaded. If somebody hands you a gun, the very first thing you should always do is make sure it is unloaded. Always. It's the first thing you should do. And as you can tell, this one's still really stiff because it hasn't had a ton of rounds put through it. Even though I've had this over 10 years, it has not had a lot of life put through it. It's been a shot here and there. Usually when we go out, I always take it. I'll run through couple of magazines through it, and then it'll get set to the side because we have other guns. Some of my friends have trauma from shooting the Springfield. They hated that gun, and so they have a hard time. They have a hard time even picking this one up because they're like, "That's just 1911s." I'm like, "Really? This one's different than the other one. You'd be surprised." Now, one thing I have heard about these that people used to, and I have no idea if it's true, but there is some evidence that it is. People would just rack the slide. They would and just pop the rounds out. I've heard that you shouldn't do that on any gun, but as heavy as the rounds are with the 1911 or the 45 ACP, that it can damage things in the extractor on this gun, and that's when they start malfunctioning. And I think that's what happened to my Springfield, honestly. I think that's where it failed. Something got broken there, and it just wasn't working right. When you fired it, you literally could feel powder spray back on you. Combine that with the concussion wave that tended to smack you in the face. It just was not pleasant shooting it at all. This one is surprisingly smooth. It's for such a cheap gun. I mean, when I bought it, I had no illusions that this was an expensive or a well-made gun. I didn't even know for 8 years that Tisas is who made it. I knew it was made in Turkey. Nowadays, Tisas is everywhere and actually get some very well-respected comments about their 1911. Several other guns they've released that people are like, hey, they make some quality guns now. There's some really good guns coming out of Turkey. Canik is a good example. CZ, which I don't have any. I plan to eventually get one, but I don't have any currently. I want to get a SAR 9. I've been eyeing the SAR 9 Gen 3. I really want one of those. But then I keep going back, do I need another striker-fired pistol? Probably the answer is yes, but hey. This is the only 1911 I currently have, as I've said. Other than getting a 10mm version of this style of gun, like I said, I want the A1 style, old GI style 10mm. I don't really have any plans to get another 1911. This one satisfies the need when if I decide to want to shoot it, I can pick up this one and fire it. I did have a 6-hour 220 Legion, which was also 45. And I compared these side by side, the $1,000 220 versus the $400 Tisas. And whereas the SIG was a nicer shooter, softer, easier to control, this one I was more accurate with. And with these Hogue grips, this is so comfortable. It's a really great gun when you feel it this way. And I decided that the 220 was the one that needed to go because I couldn't really justify keeping 245s because, it's not around I fire all that often. So I kept the 1911. And I think if you're a gun owner and you like guns, the 1911 should always be in the repertoire of a gun you own, at least once. And probably if you have a collection, you should have a 1911, because this gun is historic. It is legendary. If I could get my hands on a Luger, I'd also get a Luger. I have the M9. There's a couple other guns I would get that are military based from around the world, I should say. But getting into World War II weapons collecting is an expensive hobby and not something I'm going to do right now in my life. I wouldn't mind, and it's purely because some people will probably start to realize some of my guns I pick up because of TV or movie connections. That's where the Beretta came from. That's where the Smith & Wesson came from. It's from X-Files that I ended up trading because I hated it. The 1911 was, of course, from Magnum PI. That's where I first saw it. I almost want to get a Colt, I think it's a 70 series, 1911, which is the one Magnum PI used. But the couple I've seen online are $1,000, and I have this one, and this one shoots fantastic. I can't really justify buying another one again. I just don't shoot 45 that often, so it'd be purely for just because I wanted it. And if I'm going to do that, I'd probably be better off just buying a non-firing replica. So that's the 1911. It was used World War One, World War Two, the Korean, or was it the Korean War? Then there was Vietnam, and I think after Vietnam, it was in the 80s that we were going to go to the 9mm NATO standard. So that's when they held the trials. As I understand it, the 1911 was in those trials. It didn't perform terribly, but it didn't hold up to the other guns like the SIG and the Beretta. So, up until from 1911, I think is when it was introduced into the military, up to the 80s, mid-80s, this was the gun. Even after they adopted the M9, this served in National Guard for armories for quite a while after that. Today, I mean, there's still a plethora of ones you can buy from all sorts of companies. Some good, some bad. If you're looking for a budget one, I would highly recommend looking at Tisas. They still make 1911s up to this day, and they're considered pretty well high regarded for a budget pistol. And there's the 1911 Zig M. Very interesting gun that I hadn't had an intention of getting, and I don't regret getting it now that I've gotten it. So I hope you've enjoyed the little quest down 1911 and talk about it. It is a legend in its own right. Have a great day, and like and subscribe.